The Gungans get a bit of a bad rap among Star Wars fans. The most famous member of the species, Jar Jar Binks, is, to put it mildly, hated. People hate Jar Jar far, far more than he deserves, but he's nonetheless used primarily for comic relief and is presented as the kind of person who stumbles through life, surviving on luck alone. But don't let Jar Jar's clumsy and overbearingly friendly personality fool you. The Gungans as a whole were fierce warriors with a grand army. This force most famously fought to liberate Naboo from the Trade Federation in the Battle of the Great Grass Plains, and in this video we'll be exploring its history, equipment, and tactics.
Attention, Sergeant on deck!
Naboo was an unusual planet. Its molten outer core was primarily composed of high-energy plasma, which bubbled up through the planet's mantle, forming huge plasma deposits in the crust and vast subterranean tunnels that went extremely deep beneath the planet's surface. Most of these tunnels were flooded, forming a huge network of underground oceans that wound their way through Naboo's crust and mantle, forming a network known to the indigenous Gungans as underwaterways. This extremely exotic environment gave rise to all manner of life forms, including the sentient Gungans. The Gungans were Naboo's only sentient indigenous species, an amphibious people with a long warrior tradition. For much of their early history, the Gungans had to fight to survive on a planet with many dangerous large animals, most notably the Veermoks, which the Gungans battled extensively during an ancient ice age on Naboo. Over time, this led to the formation of tribes that cooperated and fought together. But these tribes fought amongst themselves as much as they fought Naboo's megafauna, and for thousands of years, the Gungans were a divided people. This division left Naboo vulnerable to invaders from across the stars. Thousands of years before the Battle of Naboo, an advanced sentient species known only as the Elders colonized Naboo. They fought many wars with the Gungans, which the Gungans lost. Ultimately, the Gungans were forced to abandon Naboo's surface to the Elders, and they moved their settlements underwater instead, founding the first of Naboo's iconic bubble cities, which used permeable barriers made from the planet's plentiful plasma to keep water out and air in. This was essentially the foundation of modern Gungan society, and the Gungans would continue to live out their lives underwater for centuries, heedless of the Elders on the surface. The Elders' civilization didn't last. According to later archaeologists, runaway climate change caused by the Elders' industry resulted in civilizational collapse and eventually the complete extinction of the settlers. When the Elders were gone, the Gungans reclaimed the surface, and within a few centuries, all that remained of the settlers were enormous ruined statues, overgrown and weathered. Over time, the Gungans deified the Elders and claimed the ruins of their civilization as sacred places. But the Elders weren't the last settlers to come to Naboo. In 3951 BBY, the space around Naboo was explored by Republic scouts from the core world Griswold, and a century later, refugees from a violent revolution on Griswold settled on Naboo, establishing the city of Theed and their own civilization. Due to sharp cultural divides, they didn't get along well with the Gungans, but direct conflict was initially rare, as both the humans and the Gungans were more focused on internal conflicts. This started to change, however, in 3000 BBY with the War of the Gungan Tribes. This chaotic civil conflict saw many Gungan cities destroyed, and the scale of it eventually forced the Gungan tribes to band together in coalitions. There were two such coalitions, one led by the warlord Rogo and one led by boss Garlo. Garlo's function formally unified behind the first Gungan Grand Army, which defeated Rogo and his forces and unified the Gungan people. Rogo's stronghold, Spearhead, became the city of Otoh-Gunga, the Gungan capital, and forever after, the Gungans fought together, or not at all. By the time of the Battle of Naboo, Gungan society had largely homogenized, and the Gungan Grand Army was arranged according to a single order of battle. The Grand Army could only be called by the reigning boss of Otoh-Gunga, and it consisted of tens of thousands of Gungan warriors, all well-trained and armed with exotic and unusual equipment. Each city held regular drills to ensure the Grand Army would always be combat ready, and when the army was called, it could be assembled in just 36 hours. The Grand Army had an officer corps composed primarily of generals and captains who commanded the army via whistles, drums, and horns, and its rank-and-file members were divided into 3 categories. These were Kardu cavalry, which rode into battle on Kardu, Gungan guards, full-time soldiers who were charged with policing Gungan cities, and militia gungs, who were civilian Gungans pressed into part-time service as warriors. Most of the equipment and technology the Gungan Grand Army used was either organic or plasma-based, and most of it was handcrafted. Gungan equipment designs were steeped in tradition, based on less advanced weapons used in the early days of Gungan civilization, but they were every bit as effective as conventional weapons, if not more so. Gungan warriors wore basic homemade hide armor, which was blast dampening but provided flexibility in battle. Most Gungan warriors carried tall personal energy shields, which were impervious to blaster bolts and made out of plasma. The Gungans' primary weapons were also plasma-based. These were called boomers, and they were essentially just pressurized balls of electrified plasma sealed within a thin membrane, which would break when thrown and spew plasma all over the place. Boomers came in various sizes, and they were incredibly effective, if chaotic, capable of killing enemy soldiers or battle droids within their radius of effect. Large boomers hurled from catapults could take out tanks or entire squads of enemy soldiers, while small, handheld boomers meant for use against single targets were the primary ranged weapons of Gungan warriors, thrown using short-range atol sticks or long-range cesta battle staffs. Both atol and cestas would be used at close range as clubs and pikes, respectively. Spears and electropoles were also used at close range. The Gungan Grand Army also made use of many of Naboo's large animals, which were employed as mounts, beasts of burden, and living weapons. Kardu were the most widely used of these. These reptavians were used as mounts by Gungan officers and cavalry. Larger reptilians called swifts were used as mounts by Gungan scouts, while the reptilian leras were used to carry basic cannons that fired high-yield boomers. Most bizarre of all were the cerebors, a species the Gungans used as living battering rams. The largest and most important beasts of burden in the Gungan Grand Army were the fambas, enormous herbivorous amphibians that the Gungans used to carry their shield generators. These theater shields were plasma-based and meant to cover the entire Grand Army. All told, the composition of the Grand Army was pretty ingenious, exclusively making use of Naboo's natural resources, its beasts, organic materials, and plasma. Its tactics were similarly unorthodox but effective. In large battles, the Gungans preferred to fight defensively, camping under their shields and daring the enemy to come in after them. The Grand Army could and did fight more aggressively, but millennia of fighting for survival on Naboo had apparently taught the Gungans that the best offense was a good defense. Speaking of millennia of fighting, let's get back to Naboo's history. Over 2,000 years after the Gungans unified, the human Naboo followed suit after a grim chapter of their history known as the Time of Suffering. What followed was an age of peace for the Naboo, but it saw tensions with the Gungans rise. The Naboo began encroaching on Gungan territory, and some unscrupulous Naboo businessmen began enslaving Gungan exiles, offenses that eventually culminated in the Gungan-Naboo War. This conflict lasted for nearly 30 years, and for most of that time, the Gungans had the advantage. They succeeded in killing Naboo's reigning monarch, and things got to the point where Naboo's noble houses considered bringing in mercenaries to turn the tide. The war was resolved before that was necessary, but a few decades later, some of the royal houses called the mercenaries in anyway, sending them in to harass the Gungans and drive them from sites with rich plasma reserve the noble houses wanted to mine. The Gungans won this war too, but not before the Naboo got their plasma. The Gungan Grand Army's most notable outing, however, wasn't against the Naboo, but against the Trade Federation. In the Battle of Naboo, the Gungans made peace with their human neighbors and fought together to liberate the planet. The Gungan Grand Army battled the Trade Federation droid army on the Great Grass Plains as a diversion for the Naboo's strike teams and Starfighter Corps, and they played a crucial role in winning the battle. Peace between the Gungans and Naboo persisted forever after, and during the Clone Wars, the Grand Army pledged to fight alongside the Naboo again if the Separatists made a move on their home planet. So, that's our look at the Gungan Grand Army, one of the most unorthodox military forces in Star Wars. But what do you think? Are there other local armies you'd like us to take a look at? Feel free to post your thoughts in the comments section below.